Trying to orchestrate.
The owner had kept the soldiers' bedroom as a memorial to them to died in the First War, and then there's an ongoing lease thing, so everybody that buys the house thereafter has to be
So a little bit more about myself. 10 years in the Royal Marines, so I didn't do my full time, that was enough. Another complete career. I then became involved in sales and became a sales manager for a printing company. But all through my life, having inherited my grandfather's medals when I was about 10, I had an interest that really drove my life and ends up with me actually coming out here. I also inherited his diary, so I had a head start, which is always good, and I'm sure that for those who have been doing research on the family, any little snippet that you get or anything, I know that some of you here have been researching war memorials and have written articles on war memorials. Again, you look for those little snippets that help you. Well, a diary certainly helps, and my grandfather's diary helped me immeasurably. And in fact, my father came out here and lived with me for some time, and my mother, and we also then were able to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. So that's really the reason that I'm here, and I've continued, and I take people around the battlefields. It's something that you either, it's in your blood. If you're interested in the Great War, you'll get absolutely hooked with it. So what are some of those hooks that bring me here? Well, I brought some of them with me. So these are things, I've got a couple of little boxes here. I'm going to put them on the end of this table. They're full of all sorts of little treasures inside. So this is, in fact, this is a New Testament. So it's a New Testament issued to a soldier. I picked this up in rural Dorset, where I lived for many years, in a little junk shop. And I didn't think about it. I knew what it was without even opening it up. I recognised the shape and the size and the colour of it. It's actually weathered off the actual New Testament. It's a military New Testament. It cost me 50 pence. And I stuck it in my pocket and took it home and put it on the shelf and left it there for a few days. And the one thing I did look at it and thought, it's a bit grubby. Nice, grubby. A couple of weeks later, I picked it off the shelf and thought, I'll just have a good look through it, see if there's anything that I can ascertain. The first thing I could ascertain was there are holes going right the way through it. And I hadn't noticed them. It was only when I opened it up, and what was, as you can all see, I'm going to let everybody have a look at it, it's got staining in it. And I thought that the staining when I bought it was just mud. And then I realised it's not mud, it's blood. It's absolutely soaked in blood is this Bible. Now I hasten to add, before we go any further with this story, I don't know whose it is. But I know a lot about it because he wrote information in the back. And that's the sad part. Again, we're back to that research thing about not knowing a little thing like this means so much. This soldier was, we don't know who he is, I don't know what part of the country he comes from, probably a chap from Devon, Dorset. The one thing I do know is that just before he was conscripted into the army at 18 years of age, in the October of 1917, that he, at an Easter service, that he carried the cross, because he makes the comment in the back. In 1918, in the January, he's in France. By the February, he's been wounded and he's been captured. And then the next comment is even more chilling. On the 1st of March, amputation. Don't know what. And that's why there's not a full story here. Within 6 months, he's been repatriated, he's back at home, and he's back in his hometown, and he's back in the church again. So that's his story. I don't know who he is, I don't know where exactly we're talking about, but that's all that's in the back of it. And I remember when I read that, it chilled me and fascinated me, and it's become one of the key pieces in my collection. I keep it close to me all the time. I've even known when he died. His family wrote in the back of this, and that shows how much this meant to him. He died in 1951. Still don't know who he is. people keep adding information into the back of it, but they don't add who he is. So I would love to know where he came from, where he's buried, to go and pay my respects. But this he was obviously a religious man. This meant a lot to him, and it means a lot to me. And I think that's what fires my imagination. I have stories sometimes that we never know, and sometimes that we do get the stories. So that leads me nicely on to the next little story that I have. They say it looks like me a little bit. In a rural auction in Somerset. I had no expectation of ever knowing who this man was. The only thing that I can say without a shadow of a doubt is that he died in the Great War, because these portraits were not painted unless they normally lost their lives. This is the top end of what people used to do, I suppose. A little postcard, black and white, blown up to a full size, something about the size of this, great big oak frame on the wall for the rest of the family for as long as it remains, and in some cases it remains for many generations. The next kind of best option was a hand-tinted black and white photo that would then be put on the wall, and that gave you a little bit of colour. If you were a wealthy family, and Errol here, I know who he is now, he came from a wealthy family, and they wanted something more substantial. I've just taken this out of its frame to bring it this evening, enormous great oak frame. I bought this in a little auction just because I wanted to have a picture of an officer in my collection that didn't have a name, really. I had no expectation of ever knowing who he was until I got it home. And on the back it said, Errol Ashburner, ex-Shanghai Customs Services, killed in action, Somme, 1916. I thought, fantastic. You know, and I'll be able to research him, find out all about him. There is nobody in the British Army called Errol Ashburner. And yes, I knew it wasn't done to fake, because on the back it was an old luggage label, so another mystery. So it's about trying to get to the bottom of this mystery. This was pre-computers, when you had to go down to the National Archives and try and kind of search him. I'll put him down so you can get the gist of him. A great deal. It's only when Errol Flynn comes into the cinemas that we start using the name Errol. Ashburner, quite an unusual name, so able to find as many Ashburners as I possibly could in the British Army, not a single one as an officer. The majority are rankers, but the family definitely came from Northumberland, and so I started looking in that area. He's from the Worcestershire Regiment. You can ascertain that from his cap badge. Nobody called as an officer now going into the computerised age, computerised records, officers died, soldiers died. There's nobody called Errol even who died as an officer in the First World War. So it becomes a mystery that I don't expect ever to crack. He comes with me to France. He's on above the fireplace in the front room, and he becomes one of the many unknown officers of the Great War. It's a cold winter's day. Just about going to dusk, and they're filming, and if anybody's ever worked with a camera crew, you know you refilm things over and over and over and over again. And I, bored stupid, standing by the cemetery entrance, is Caterpillar Valley Cemetery, quite close to my village. In fact, one of the closest cemeteries to my village. And I go to the little door for those that have been to Commonwealth War Cemetery before, little door where you have the register and the visitors book. Lift out the register, open it up to have a look at the soldier who's buried in front of me, and read it, quite interesting. I'm shutting it, and literally going to put it back, and I noticed that the name below the chap I've been looking at is called Errol. And I thought, ooh, so I opened it up again, and he's in the right regiment, he's in the Worcestershire Regiment, and he's an officer. Well, to start off with, that shouldn't have happened, because I've done that research, and there shouldn't be a chap with a Christian name of Errol in the Worcestershire Regiment as an officer. And he's called France, Errol France. And I thought, it's got to be him. But where's the Ashburner come from? And I read down, and his mother's put a little inscription in there, in the register. And this is slightly paraphrasing. It's along the lines of, in memory of my dear and only son, from his ever-loving mother, I can't remember what the first name was, but whatever it was, Ashburner. And she's obviously divorced her husband, and she's reverted back to her maiden name. And mentally, she had reverted him back to her maiden name. And so Ash Benner is not his name at all. It's just something that she's changed herself. So I start to see that I would never have tracked him down. I would never have found him by research, because once I do know who he is, I can go to the records and check. And the Errol has been transcribed as Ennol. They thought the two R's were an N. So there is absolutely no way that I would ever have found him by any kind of research tool. I needed to open that register and look on that page. And that's when it gets a bit because you think 950 cemeteries and more, counting, on the Western Front. I have to open the door, lift out the register, open that page, on that page. And just as a confirmation to make sure it's him, his service records exist as well. So I was able to look at his service record, and in his service record it says Chinese Customs Services. So there's no doubt it's him. So I think it's just you know, for those who've done research will know what it's like when you have that kind of coincidence. It is really, really, really odd.
That is not the Gar Crater.
Not, I don't know, maybe they don't take it as seriously. It's a bit, unless I found the soon it is going to get forgotten. I hope I brought my glasses with me, because I'm not going to be able to read anything otherwise, am I? I'll have to rely on you, darling. Something come up that's looking...
Look, you just don't realise how you've got it. 4 times side Irish.
Yes. That's what they had.
Yeah.
I wonder who went down there at least.
Yeah.
They did alright in the award, didn't and if necessary, like I suppose it's not over far, is it? We're heading towards that anyway. We can always try and get it.
Nope.
Yeah.
But
It's sometimes quite hard to go together. So if you, it's just great if you can just be a bit vigilant about movement and times and things like that. And if you know it's been like 10 minutes, it's probably more than 5, which is what we might have said at the start. Obviously, we don't want to drag you away if you want to spend special time somewhere or anything like that. Yeah, I don't know how else to put it. Sorry, but yeah, just be aware of that and remember there are like another 33 people staring at you, maybe, waiting for you to finish whatever it is you're doing.
I did 3 years and we just got photos of battlefields and cemeteries.
there's a lot of I went to a wonderful super base last year in Crete, and the super base cemetery. It's one of those beautiful spots. It's at the top of the super bay. You shouldn't be stuck on one. There's also the tower beyond it.
Yeah, we're fine. So we're just at the fork now.
You must now stop running.
No. Where's the redoubt?
Sorry? There's bits of the redoubt. You can see, if you go, there's T-Foul, so you go to Senecopper T-Foul, there's a bit of it over there. But actually, I think it's called the Schraven redoubt, was actually right there. And it's, they basically built T-Foul on top of the Germans' main redoubt. I mean, and they, during the course of the day, they attacked.
But if you do want to know, you're welcome to hang here for a minute, and I'll just give you what I have, and hopefully it's useful to you. After the war ended, Thiepval was chosen as the location for the memorial to the missing, to commemorate those who died in the Somme sector before the 20th of March 1918 and have no known grave. This is the largest and most imposing of the memorials, which we've witnessed along the track there. Of the memorials of the missing, and visiting here is a moving and sobering experience. You can tell us about that afterwards if it is. Those who died in the Somme after the 20th of March 1918 are commemorated in Pozières. Thiepval was one of the fortress villages that was held by the Germans on the Somme front in 1916. The village was destroyed by the bombardment, except for one part of the chateau, the ruins of which contained machine gun nests. The houses in the village, although flattened, had deep cellars where the Germans held out, and their machine gun posts were not destroyed by the bombardment. X-Corps was the attacking formation here on the 1st of July 1916. In front of and to the south of the village, the 32nd Division attacked. The 36th Division attacked just to the north of the village, which is relevant to the Ulster Tower over there, which we will see later. 73,357 names were commemorated here. The slight decrease to today's number of 72,116 represents the identification of bodies since then, resulting in soldiers no longer being missing, relative to what your man yesterday was talking about. I can't remember his name now, what was it? Pete, that's it, yeah. So some additional names have, however, also been added as far away as Luce and Le Quesnel. The fact that these bodies were recovered in late 1931 and early 1932 13 years or so after the end of the war, demonstrates how many men still lay in the fields of the Western Front. The headstones at Mill Road are laid... Oh, that's another point. We don't need to talk about that. But anyway, yeah, so that's just some of the basic information that you'll get. The visitor centre's got loads more, but yeah, it's going to be real impressive in there, so take as much time as you need to do that thing we were talking about.
If I can approach it.
The thing is, you don't get offended about it. You don't get offended about it. There's another one I don't know. So one day, I wonder. And that was me worried I was going to have to take your toes up and have publicity.
No, it's more experience, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, you'll be
I think there's a Mercure hotel.
Oh, yeah.
So our friends said you can actually get.
To advance their position for about a mile up onto this obvious vantage point that you can see that overlooks the front line over on the left there. All day we're going to be trending northerly up the front line, and so it's going to be a general direction. Left is going to be the Allies and right is going to be for the Central Powers. And I lost myself here. So let's see what we got. They successfully managed to advance their position for about a mile, as I said, beyond their starting position, almost reaching the German field gun positions located in the valley leading to Grandcourt. Regrettably, due to difficulty of supplying ammunition, equipment, food and water, which was a common thread throughout the war, they had to fall back. German counterattacks from mid-afternoon added to the danger that the forward Irish troops might be cut off. The position was considered untenable for the Irish soldiers by the end of the day, and a decision was made to withdraw back to the German front line. Which is just a common story throughout the entire war, which you probably already know. Lots of really effective offensives were made, and then lost again just because there weren't the support to actually follow it up to keep it there. 900 casualties, 79 officers and 1,777 other ranks were killed. 102 officers and 2,626 other ranks were wounded. 215 people went missing. and 165 were taken prisoner. So it wasn't an overly successful, but it could have been. And the tower itself, there was actually a competition to decide on the design for this Ulster Tower here, and it was they actually decided to go with sorry, not this one. This wasn't a competition. They were looking for a sort of representable architecture in Ireland at the time that would be good here, and they decided on what's it called, the Helen's Tower. If anyone's been there, in Clanboy near Belfast. So this was pretty much a copy of that particular structure over in Belfast itself. Yeah. And there is actually a black spire somewhere. I don't know where it is though. I think it's at the back there. Maybe around the back. Yeah. And that's dedicated to the men and women of the Orange Institution. Yeah. So. Pretty impressive little structure though, eh?
Fencing? Yeah. I think you've got between the two fences, right?
Like, because that top bits are a knee cap.
July, it was remembered through this memorial park. No, sorry, of the 1st of July. Yeah. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I've got loads of extra information on the trenches.
I think that's a trench.
I'd have to have a ball of string. I mean, like you say, if you went too far and it was dark and you weren't sort of using light, you thought, how am I getting back? And it was quite a worry because, like you say, you don't know the reason all that.
1917, the German army left their positions at Serre village and the Ribbon Ridge, which they had firmly held since 1914, and made a tactical withdrawal to a line of defence, which you all know. Hindenburg Line, yeah. Which they actually called the Siegfried Stellung. Final resting place of 834 French soldiers, of whom remains a 240 line and offering. There is a commemorative plaque to the dead of 200.
Yeah, so you just go and serve.
The attack failed. 3rd and 31st Divisions renewed the attempt without success on the 13th of November. The Germans evacuated Serre on the 24th of February 1917, and the 22nd Manchesters entered the village on the following morning. In the spring of 1917, the battlefields of Ancre were cleared, as said before, and a number of territories were made, but then it fell back into enemy hands on the 25th of March 1918. But were recovered on the following 14th of August. So, we've had a lot of back and forth, as we've already known in this area. There are now over 80 World War I casualties commemorated in this site, mainly of the 31st Division who fell in July and November 1916. Half are unidentified, as always, and it covers 293 square metres. Do you think that's square metres?